Sa samyachati bhakticha. Saishadya purusha. Kalpe.
Sasamyachati paticha.
Saishadya purusha.
Saishadya purusha.
Kalpe kalpe srijatyaja.
Kalpe kalpe srijatyaja.
Atmatmani atmanatmanam.
Atmatmani atmanatmanam.
Sasanyachati paticha.
Sasamyachati paticha. Saishadya purusha.
Kalpe kalpe sujati raja.
Kalpe kalpe srijatyaja. Atmanatmani atmanatmanam. Sasamyachati paticha.
Saishadya purusha.
Saishadya purusha.
Kalpe kalpe srijatyaja.
Kalpe kalpe srijatyaja. Atmatmani atmanatmanam. Sasamyachati paticha.
Anyone online?
Saisha Adya Purusha. Go ahead, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Saisha Adya Purusha.
Saishadya Purusha.
Kalpe kalpe srijatyajaha.
Kalpe kalpe srijatyaha.
Atmatmanya atmanatmanam.
Atmanmani atmanatmanam.
Sasamyachati paticha.
Sasamyachati paticha.
Saisha Adya Purusha.
Saishadya Purusha.
Kalpe kalpe srijatyaja.
Kalpe kalpe srijatyaja.
Atmatmanya atmanatmanam.
Atmanmani atmanatmanam.
Sasamyachati paticha.
Sasamyachati paticha.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay, we'll go through the word for word. Just pull this up. Sa. He. Esha. The very. Adya. The original personality of Godhead. The Purusha. The Mahavishnu incarnation. A plenary portion of Govinda, Lord Krishna. Kalpe kalpe. In each and every millennium. Sri Jati. Creates. Aja. The unborn. Atma. Self. Atmani. Upon the self. Atmana. By his own self. Atmanam. Own self. Sa. He. Samyachati. Chati. Absorbs. Pati. Maintains. Cha. Also. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Chai. That supreme original personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, expanding his plenary portion as Mahavishnu, the first incarnation, creates this manifested cosmos. But he is unborn. The creation, however, takes place in him. And the material substance and manifestations are all himself. He maintains them for some time and absorbs them into himself again. The creation is non-different from the Lord, and still he is not in the creation. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita 9.4 as follows. Maya tatam idam sarvam jagat avyakta murtina matstani sarva bhutani na chaham teshav avashtita. The impersonal conception of the absolute truth is also a form of the Lord called avyakta murti. Murti means form, but because his impersonal feature is inexplicable to our limited senses, he is the avyakta murti form. And in that inexplicable form of the Lord, the whole creation is resting. Or, in other words, the whole creation is the Lord himself. And the creation is also non-different from him. But simultaneously, he, as the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is aloof from the created manifestation. The impersonalists gives stress to the impersonal form or feature of the Lord and does not believe in the original personality of the Lord. But the Vaishnavas accept the original form of the Lord, of whom the impersonal form is merely one of the features. The impersonal and personal conceptions of the Lord are existing simultaneously, and this fact is clearly described in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, and also in other Vedic scriptures. Inconceivable to human intelligence, the idea must simply be accepted on the authority of the scriptures, and it can only be practically realized by the progress of devotional service unto the Lord, and never by mental speculation or inductive logic. The impersonalists depend more or less on inductive logic, and therefore they always remain in darkness about the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Their conception of Krishna is not clear, although everything is clearly mentioned in all the Vedic scriptures. The poor fund of knowledge cannot comprehend the existence of an original personal form of the Lord when he is expanded in everything. This imperfectness is due, more or less, to the material conception that a substance distributed widely in parts can no longer exist in its original form. The original personality of Godhead, Adya, Govinda, expands himself as the Mahavishnu incarnation and rests in the causal ocean, which he himself creates. The Brahma Samhita 547 confirms this as follows. Ya karanarvana jale bhajati smar yoga nidram anantan jagat anda saroma kupa adhara shaktim aval ambyas param svamurtim govindam adi purusham tam aham bhajami. Lord Brahmaji says in his Brahma Samhita, I worship the primeval Lord Govinda, who lies down in the causal ocean in his plenary portion as Mahavishnu, with all the universes generating from the pores of hair on his transcendental body. and who accepts the mystic slumber of eternity. So this Mahavishnu is the first incarnation in the creation. From him, all the universes are generated and all material manifestations are produced, one after another. The causal ocean is created by the Lord as the Mahatattva, as a cloud in the spiritual sky, and is only a part of his different manifestations. The spiritual sky is an expansion of his personal rays, and he is the Mahatattva cloud also. He lies down and generates the universes by his breathing, and again, by entering into each universe as Garbhodaksha Vishnu, he creates Brahma, Shiva, and many other demigods for maintenance of the universe, and again absorbs the whole thing into his person, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9:7. Sarva bhutani kaunteya praktrim yanti mam ikam kalpakshaye punashtani kalpadu vishrajami aham. O son of Kunti, when the kalpa, or the duration of the life of Brahma, is ended, then all the created manifestations enter into my prakriti, or energy. And again, when I desire, the same creation takes place by my personal energy. The conclusion is that these are all but displays of the Lord's inconceivable personal energies, of which no one can have any full information. This point we have already discussed. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshulin Militam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Anobishta Stapitam Jaina Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadhamayam Tadati Sva Pandantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Before I begin, I'd like to ask for blessings and permissions from all the Vaishnavas here and throughout the universe to speak something in the line of Parampara through Srila Prabhupada, and please him and my Guru. So I'll read this translation one more time. That supreme original personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, expanding his plenary portion as Mahavishnu, the first incarnation, creates this manifested cosmos, but he is unborn. The creation, however, takes place in him, and the material substance and manifestations are all himself. He maintains them for some time and absorbs them into himself again.
It's amazing.
Yes, it's very amazing. Now, just to give a little context, what we have going on here is the explanation of the creation of the universe and where things are coming from, what's happening to them as they come into existence, and then what happens to them at the end. Now, in this, we have some what one could consider, or very much is so, some paradoxes. Can anyone without looking recognize what the big paradox is in this translation, that in this verse? You can look, I guess, because who's going to remember? What's the big paradox here?
He's the first incarnation, but yet he's unborn.
Yes. Well, how can that be? So this is very interesting. Right? So what is a paradox? Well, the definition of a paradox is that a seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that when investigated or explained may prove to be well-founded or true. So what we have here is two simultaneously opposite things seeming to be existing at the same time. This is a consistent thing that we come up against in spiritual life, in all of life actually, but specifically in spiritual life. Many things are presented to us and to our logical mind. They occur as paradoxes. How could they conceivably be existing at the same time? So consider this. A child asks, can God do everything? Can God do everything?
Yes.
Okay. So if on that sense, can he make a stone so heavy that he can't lift it?
Yes.
So then how can he do everything? So we are confronted with this in spiritual life. Now, these are paradoxes that show up in our mind, and this is what we're trying to do is understand them through our logical mind. But the domain of spirituality and the absolute truth is beyond the logical mind's understanding or ability to understand. And from here is where we can actually, this is once we can move beyond the logical mind, which comes through realization and practice, we can move into the realm of the absolute truth. So on the surface, if we're perceiving and reading these types of verses and these texts, which have these apparent huge paradoxes, our logical mind becomes zapped out. How can we make sense of it? There's another major basis for the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, which was given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself, which is a philosophy called Achintya Abheda Bheda Tattva. That means simultaneously, we, the jiva, who we really are, is simultaneously the same and different from Krishna. And the description is given that it's like the sun and the sun's rays. The sun is coming from however many miles away it's coming from. The rays are entering into where we're sitting now. But could we say that the sun itself is in this room? We could say that the sun's rays are in this room, but are the sun's rays really different than the sun? We come up to the point of not being able to fully reconcile this. And in the same way, we are come to the point in spiritual life with these types of paradoxes where we have to accept something without being able to fully logic it out with our logical mind. Now, in relation to the logical mind is somewhat like a prison for the conditioned soul. Because we are stuck within the boundaries of this logical ability for our mind to make out what's going on around us. So in the conditioned state, what we attempt to do is perceive reality and make sense of it with the logical mind, and from there evaluate what's around us. And then once we evaluate it, we accept that as real, and then that creates constraints and boundaries on what we can actually understand or perceive through our limited senses. And this is what all of the spiritual teachers throughout history, bona fide spiritual teachers, have come to give us, which is the freedom from the prison of our logical mind and our limited ability to perceive reality. They're coming from a higher plane of understanding. And they're saying to us, there's something bigger. There's something greater that you can't fully perceive right now. But if you follow this process, if you do these things, you can come to this place where full happiness, knowledge, and eternal life exists. This is the essence of all true spiritual teachings. And it is exemplified and given to us in a extremely streamlined and highly potent methodology through Srila Prabhupada and the philosophy of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. But what it requires from us is to accept something that we cannot fully explain or logic out with our minds. So it requires a leap of faith. And this is the foundation of spiritual life, is having and attaining faith, or in Sanskrit it's called Shraddha, faith. And when we can, because what we have to do is we have to accept something that we ourselves cannot perceive or fully understand. But when we can do that, we can be guided towards a higher level of understanding of our own reality, which will give us real peace, eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And if we understand that actually our logical mind is constraining us, and if we only use that logical mind to perceive reality, that we will be limited and we won't be able to fully reach the true potential that we have in this human form of life. Has anyone ever heard of the Stockholm Syndrome? Anyone want to explain it?
When you're like being held hostage and you start to side with your captor.
Yes, exactly. So it's this clinical researchers or whatever have come up, there's this many instances that they find that people become held captive for whatever reason. Actually, the reason why it's called Stockholm Syndrome is because in 1973, there was a bank robbery and like 6 people or something ended up being held hostage for like a week by this man. And by the end of it, they all ended up siding with this man, and they actually, the man who was holding them hostage went to prison, and they created a fund and a whole thing to try to get him out of prison. Stockholm Syndrome. This was in Stockholm in 1973. And not only this, but many instances we see that there's a situation where people are being held hostage, and they're siding with, or they're feeling attraction or a connection to that's holding them hostage. And I would say, and we can see that in the same way, we have Stockholm Syndrome for that which is holding us hostage in this material world, which is our attachments through our logical mind and our attachments to our personality. But then at the same time, we ask, how can we become free? Because we are suffering. So we seek out ways to become free from the suffering that we find. And before we come to Krishna consciousness, we try so many things, and we always end up frustrated. But then even when we come to Krishna consciousness, we understand that, okay, I need to let go of this. I need to let go of my attachments, and I need to move away from my own personal enjoyment in this material world and focus on, being pleasing the senses of Krishna. But there's so many deeply ingrained attachments that we have that we hold on. I've given this metaphor. It's not even a metaphor, but this story previously. It's said somewhere, I don't know, Srila Prabhupada gives this story, but there's a group of sages in the forest, and there's one highly evolved sage with them. And the other sages ask him, we can't let go of our material attachments. What is it that's holding on, that's keeping us stuck to this material world? And then the one highly evolved sage goes up to a tree, and he hugs the tree. He holds the tree really tight, and he starts screaming, let me go, let me go, let me go. And so like this, we're holding on to something, but then we're asking, why Why are we stuck? So this is how actually, at first we need, as I mentioned, faith to begin this process. And then in this Bhagavad Gita verse that Prabhupada mentions in this purport, Bhagavad Gita 9:4, Krishna, the purport, Prabhupada says, Krishna cannot be understood through our material senses. So then the question is, how can we understand Krishna? So how can we move towards letting go of these material attachments? He gives the answer. Only to one who is engaged in pure devotional service under proper guidance is Krishna revealed. So pure devotional service. Pure devotional service means unmotivated, uninterrupted service to the master, who is Krishna. So when we can let go of our desires to have our own happiness and be fully focused on Krishna's happiness and be performing activities that are in service of that master who is Krishna, then we are performing devotional service. And that devotional service can be performed in the temple. That devotional service can be performed outside of the temple. But the important aspect is that it's under the proper guidance. And what is the proper guidance? The proper guidance is in the parampara, or the disciplic succession through the bona fide lineage of spiritual teachers. And we specifically have a Srila Prabhupada as our guide and our direction. So if we follow Srila Prabhupada's direction and we follow the teachers underneath Srila Prabhupada who are bona fide, then we can be sure that we are under the proper guidance, so that what can happen? Krishna can be revealed to us. And if Krishna becomes revealed to us, what happens? We can find peace and happiness in this very life. We can break free from the frustrations. We can break free from the prison of the logical mind, which is holding us inside of a limited view of reality, which ultimately keeps us in the cycle of samsara. What is the cycle of samsara? The cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease, repeatedly taking bodies. Reincarnation is a fact. It is described that what happens at the end, any jiva, any soul, who we really are, the energy, the person who's inhabiting the body, when it grows old, it is born, it grows, and then it dies. And then at the end of the body, when it has no more use for the body, it transmigrates to another body. This is what's called reincarnation. And this is the process lifetime after lifetime in the material world. And the way that we take on more bodies is based on what we've done in the current body. And there's no guarantee of what type of body we're going to get after we have this human form. This is one of the big questions when we start to explain reincarnation to people. So the understanding that, hey, at the end of this life, I may very well end up in another life is acceptable. But the idea that actually you might not end up in another human body really throws people for a loop when they hear that. But that's a fact, because actually it's very logical if you want to be logical about it, if you want to stick within the confines of logic, that there's so many living entities that are living just like us, but don't have human bodies. How is it that we ended up that we have human bodies and they don't? What's the explanation? Well, we have the explanation, actually. The explanation is that based on the karma, based on the evolution of their consciousness, not evolution of species, but evolution of consciousness, we end up in a particular type of body. And to end up in the human form of body is a very rare and valuable opportunity. Why? Because we have an intelligence and an ability to perceive the reality of who we are through understanding our position as an eternal servant of the Supreme Soul, who is Krishna. So, as we are parts and parcel of the Supreme Soul, in the human form of life, we can understand that we are a part of the Supreme Soul and that our mission is to break free from the cycle of the material world suffering and go back to the spiritual world. Because we originally came from the spiritual world. Another paradox, by the way, but we won't get into that. Because we were in the spiritual world, now we're in the material world, and we're going to go back to the spiritual world. But then once we go back, we don't come back to the material world. Okay? That's important. But to get out of the material energy, actually it's described that it's like an egg. So real quick, this is interesting because in this verse, we're talking about Mahavishnu. Get this, Mahavishnu is emanating. He's so big that he's emanating universes from his pores. How big is that? And so it's also described that there's innumerable universes, and they're shaped like eggs. It's described by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that it's like a bucket of mustard seeds. Universes, like imagine this, right? It's a bucket of mustard seeds. Every single one of those mustard seeds is like a universe. Is like, you know, so that, and every universe is inconceivably big. And then that's just the material creation. And the spiritual portion of creation is said to be 3/4 the size of the material creation. Mahavishnu is so big, he's emanating pores. He's emanating universes out of his pores. So from there, we understand that Krishna is very inconceivable. But our position is that we don't need to understand all of this with our logical mind. We need to, for us to make progress in our spiritual life, we follow the directions of the spiritual teachers. We take direction and guidance, and we perform devotional service to make progress in spiritual life. It's very simple. We don't need the logical mind, really. Although if we want to get deep into the logical aspects of Krishna consciousness and all of that and feed that logical mind, Prabhupada makes a mention. We have volumes of books. Who can say in any spiritual tradition that they have more like written knowledge for the logical mind to work through than what we can, just what Srila Prabhupada gave us in the last 10 years of his life. The Srimad Bhagavatam, 18 big books. But ultimately, that's not this. Everything that's in all of these literatures can be revealed to us through the simple process of chanting Hare Krishna. That's it. So simple, even a child can do it. Prabhupada says even a dog can do it. Luckily for me, because my consciousness is at that level. And we have the mercy. So to be in this position, to be able to chant Hare Krishna and gain spiritual knowledge without having to go through all the processes that the yogis, that is explained in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, when you go through the different processes of yoga. As I was mentioning, each universe is like an egg, a mustard seed. But to get out of those universes, there's layers. Each layer is 10 times bigger than the layer before it. I don't remember exactly what they are, but it's like milk, fire, water, so many things. And they're inconceivably large. So if you're going to get out of the material energy without the mercy of the spiritual master, one would have to literally become so powerful that they can materially take themselves out of this material energy through the process of like austerity and yoga. That's impossible in the Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is the cycle of time that we are in. Vedic understanding of time is that it's cyclical. So there's four ages, 4 cycles. And so each one becomes more degraded from a consciousness level. And this Kali Yuga in general, people are at the lowest consciousness. And the lifespan of people in Kali Yuga are the shortest in comparison to what they are in the other yugas or other time frames. So we don't even have enough time to be alive in Kali Yuga to even come close to doing what it takes to gain spiritual liberation, so to speak. So all these attempts that people make in Kali Yuga to try to, meditate or, get there through whatever type of Ashtanga yoga and this and that, like from a spiritual perspective, it's a waste of time. From a spiritual perspective, all we need to do is position ourselves, which we're all already positioned. If you're listening to this online, you're listening to this here, you are already positioned. You are extremely fortunate soul to have come to the point of getting the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself, and through Srila Prabhupada to simply chant Hare Krishna and follow the directions that Prabhupada gave us to associate with devotees. Follow the regulative principles. Take prasadam. It's very simple. And ultimately, aside from the difficulties that we have and the attachments that we hold on to, it's a very easy process. And it's joyfully performed. If you've seen the Hiranyakashipu, or you see some of these austerities that they perform, they literally perform austerities for like 10,000 years, meditating on the tips of their toes, coming to a point where the ants are eating their skin. They eats them alive, and through that they get the boon of like Lord Brahma, and then they get some like superpower. This we don't need. So we get this perfect process of Krishna consciousness. Now, I'll just conclude here and open it up for questions or ideas. There's so much we could have said. I didn't even really get into the purport so much, but the very end of the purport, it says, the conclusion is that these are all but displays of the Lord's inconceivable personal energies. Quickly, the purport discusses impersonal understanding of Krishna and personal understanding of Krishna. So there is a philosophical approach to spiritual life that the impersonal energy merging into the impersonal energy of Krishna is the highest goal of spiritual realization. That is what's being explained here. And what Prabhupada is giving us, and what is in this whole section of the Srimad Bhagavatam and so many other places, is that it's the personal understanding of Krishna that is a higher level, a higher understanding of spiritual life. That the source is not impersonal, is not a void that we merge back into and like just soak up the rays of it for eternity. It's to go above that to the source is the person Krishna. And now it's not as important right now for us to fully like grasp that, but just to kind of explain it a bit because it's described in this purport. But ultimately, what Prabhupada is saying at the end, this is the inconceivable personal energies of which no one can have any full information. Why can no one have any full information? Because even Krishna is said to not have any full information because it's always expanding. Krishna's energies are always expanding. It's never done. In that case, so what happens is as it continues to go, it goes like sometimes I'm out distributing books and we'll run into people who have, maybe they come from an Indian origin or somewhere that they have like read the Bhagavad Gita or whatever. And they say, oh, I already know that. I know that. That's, I'm a Hindu. I grew up with this. So, well, please take the book and give it to someone else then. Or like, do you live by this book? Clearly they don't, but they're already in this mindset. They know it all already. That's a very dangerous mindset to be in. If any spiritually realized soul or anyone who's made any progress down the path will recognize that there's always more to learn. So we're always seeking for the spiritual knowledge from the bona fide source. So if we can take anything away from this, that I took away from this in the development of this talk, was that look out for the paradoxes in spiritual life. Recognize that we're limited by our logical mind. And that inside of that logical mind, we're in somewhat of what we could call a prison. And the spiritual teachers the bona fide spiritual teachers have come to show us what is on the other side of the logical mind, and that is transcendental knowledge. And that can only be realized through devotional service, under a bona fide spiritual teacher like Srila Prabhupada. So thank you very much. And if there's any thoughts, questions, comments, objections, we'll start here inside the temple, and then we can go to if anyone has any. Yes, Prabhu.
In verse it says Mahavishnu is the first incarnation, but as we all know that Sankarshan is he expands himself into Sankarshan first, and then first quadruple expansion takes place, and then Mahavishnu. Like after that, Mahavishnu. So why is Prabhupada saying Mahavishnu is the first incarnation?
It's a good question. That I don't have the answer. That's a bit beyond my pay grade. So we can look deeper. Maybe Dronacharya has some thoughts on that, or anyone else.
I remember seeing that and thought that of that. So I think in the material manifestation, Mahavishnu is the first.
So let's just so okay. So in the material manifestation, Mahavishnu is the first. Okay. Does anyone else have anything on that point online? The point is the question of why is it said that Mahavishnu is the first? Where does it say that exactly? Yeah.
I think it's in the translation.
It's also in the
His plenary portion, the first incarnation, creates the manifested cosmos, but he is unborn. Yeah.
So here it is. In the paragraph, it starts, in the purport, the paragraph starts. So this Mahavishnu is the first incarnation in the creation.
Mm-hmm.
And from him, all the universes are generated. It's the first incarnation. When they say creation, material creation.
Yes.
We know that since we are here from, let's say, trillions of lifetimes we are here. So, but then when we let's say by luck, we go back to our end. Prabhupada says it's mere moments. Moments is less than millisecond.
Mhm.
So, and he also said that we do not come back again in the material. Why we still like there might be a chance that we might think that we are the controller and we should. So why?
So I was just actually a few weeks ago, I was talking about this with Vishnu Prabhu, and he said that there is a lot of difficulty and confusion in relation to this point. But I had this exact question because he said because usually, always once we go back, we don't come back, but there is still the possibility of coming back because of free will. Because that we do always have that ability to exercise our free will, and it's kind of like outside of the logical ability for us to understand. Because if you said, okay, well, to get there we have to be fully pure, right? We have to be completely purified here in this material world to be able to get back to the spiritual world. So then, how is it that we could possibly come back if we're totally pure? And that is something that we kind of can't come to an inference with in the logical mind. But the answer that I got from Vishnu Prabhu is that because there's still free will, even in the spiritual world, there's always that little tiny bit of chance that you can utilize that free will to come back. And Dronacharya, if you have any thoughts on that or anything, I mean, this is very highly,
Also, like,
yeah.
I heard the same.
Okay.
It's plausible that you can, in theory, it's possible because of free will.
Right.
It's not my words, but I have heard this saying that like even if we do have free will, after thinking like I am the controller, that lifetime we have spent in the material world, all of the tragedies we have, all of the torture we have got. So like after thinking that it starts getting in your mind again, and then it cancels out your thinking that you have free will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, that is one thing that was brought up in the conversation as well. That we can remember, like we have a remembrance of what happened to us, what it was like, the suffering that we had to endure in the material world.
Yeah.
But go ahead. No, I mean, I was just going to say, I mean, the suffering because one might ask, like, well, why do we have to suffer? If Krishna is kind, then why is it that we're suffering? But the suffering that we're experiencing is actually for us it's a push to get us out and to keep us out.
To me, it's not so hard to conceive of this because have you ever done something where we've we suffered, we had an experience where we've gotten some type of suffering from, but yet over time we forget just how much we suffered and we wind up doing the same experience again, and then we're just like, oh, here we go again. We forget.
Yeah.
We get covered over. Now, I guess in our original spiritual consciousness, we'd be fully cognizant of everything, but the potential for us to redo something that we knew caused us suffering, and we knew that it was suffering, but yet we still think maybe this time it'll be different.
Mm-hmm.
That's our experience in the material world. We think, well, this time I figure, this time I'll steer clear of all the, the trouble,
Right.
But we don't. It still finds us. So that independence of wanting to be separate from Krishna, if that ever manifests, boom, we're back here in the material world again.
Right.
But the idea is that once you go through that experience, that you'll never want to experience that again. But it's plausible.
Yeah. And I mean, and we can thank, I guess, just coming from the point of the verse and what I was discussing is like, we can thank the logical mind for that, right? Like we come up with ideas and reasons like inside of our own perception of why it's going to work if it hasn't worked in the past, or new ideas to enjoy, because from the Vedic understanding, it's not just like the consciousness is broken down into different categories, right? There's there's the soul, the intelligence, and the mind. So, and the senses are part of the mind. It's like the repository of the senses. It's actually described that the mind is a sense. And what's usually happening before we come into, in a conditioned state, the senses are controlled, the mind is being controlled by the senses to get, touch, taste, feel. And it's utilized, and so and those can never be satisfied, the senses in the mind, especially, when they're controlled by the desires. And that intelligence as a function of the consciousness is then used by the senses and the mind to get what it wants. And the soul is like just lost. But then what we do in spiritual life is we come to the proper, it's the opposite. Instead of the intelligence being used by the mind and the senses, the soul is directing. There's a picture in the Bhagavad Gita with the horses and the reins, and it's like there's an explanation in this. The soul is directing the intelligence, as opposed to the senses and the mind directing the intelligence. And then we can utilize, and the senses and the mind can be used in service of our spiritual understanding, as opposed to being used by them. So this is the real fundamental shift at the beginning of spiritual life that changes everything in our life, actually. Anything from anyone online or anyone else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. The way I was in my small mind reconciling this is we get reformed in this prison house, and then so we go back. So most of the time when we get reformed, we will not make the same mistake. But then that free will is still given by Krishna, And so we can exercise that free will, but we will obviously not choose to. So to me, in that way, if I explain that way to myself, I'm able to, see that it all fits very nicely. But my question is more for you preachers than, you said there is an element of faith. You have to accept that is the truth. How do you preach to people who say, see, that's the gray area where people say, we'll pick up this method or we'll pick up some other method. How do you preach to them and say, this is the right path?
So we can appeal to the logical mind, and we can appeal to the different aspects of the senses. And Srila Prabhupada was a master in this, and this is how he did in the beginning. What did he do? He gave prasadam. There's the different levels. Some people like music. Okay, we have music. Some people they love food. We have food. Some people, they need their logical mind. Like, okay, what is this? Let me read about this. This makes sense. Yeah, I got it. Like every aspect is there. Some people can just blindly like, oh, okay, I can sit here and chant Hare Krishna. This is easy. They like to do it. So we have to meet people where they are. And if we follow Srila Prabhupada's example, we can maintain the bona fide aspects of Krishna consciousness and still meet people where they are by giving them what appeals to them at their level of understanding. Is that okay?
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes. Muktidatri Mataji has her hand up.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Muktidatri.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Pranam.
Pranams.
Śaśi-śekhara, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam. This Brajesh Govinda Das.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I hear this lecture. You had very nice thing. You mentioned this just for reflection. I see you. I hear that you say someone in the born, it might be India or something. When we try to distribute the books or Krishna consciousness, something we're talking about. They said, yeah, we know about that. We know about, yeah. This is kind of ego they have. Really, the Prabhupada said that our modesty is really whatever we know, but this is not really enough. We have to know more and more, but we just think about, I don't know anything.
Yes.
And also I can share in my His Holiness.
Prabhu.
Yes, my spiritual master, His Holiness, might be birthplace of the Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Sri Krishna. You don't think like, yeah, I'm already in the birthplace in Krishna, I'll be delivered. No, you have to do but this is your great achievement because might be your past karma or like the past time you have the greatness. That's why you are born in this country for the birthplace of the Lord. But you have to do these activities this time, your Krishna consciousness. If you neglect this, then he said, you will might be lost the Vaikuntha Biman. I mean the airplane of the Vaikuntha. You will lost anyway. Then this is the very required and important. You have to do your Krishna consciousness this time. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, it's similar. Just like Bharat Maharaj, he was he had prema bhav. He was at a point of prema with Krishna, living in the forest, and he got attached to a deer. So he had to come back in the life of a deer in his next life. So as you mentioned, you can be on the Vimana going back to Godhead and still fall and still get back. So we had to be very careful. And Prabhupada has told us that in so many ways. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
I think it's a wonderful class. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Krishna Prabhuji, very nice class.
Thank you.
And I have one question. First, I want to say that I really like the point you said, and the source directs the intelligence. And then with that intelligence, we use the senses, mind senses. If the soul is not purified, so we will not make the intelligent decision, and we will not use the senses in a proper way. Is that right?
Yes. Well, so until the soul is purified, we have to fully, even then, we really have to, that's why we have to take direction from a purified soul. So we're always taking direction from a guru and this purified soul until we are purified, in which case we still take direction from a purified soul.
Okay. And intelligence is that means consciousness. It's not a matter.
No, so intelligence is it's like you can look at it a different section. Intelligence is a function of consciousness. It's like a category. It's its own thing. And like from a Western perspective, or from the idea of the mind, is like you have the mind, and it's all the mind and the consciousness. It's all one thing. But actually, from the Vedic understanding in Bhagavad Gita, it's explained in the Bhagavad Gita that it's broken out into the mind, the intelligence, false ego, soul, the body. These are all separate things. And this is in the material, subtle body. This is material, but then there's also the spiritual. The soul is spiritual. But when we go back to the spiritual world, we actually have an intelligence in the spiritual world. We have an identity, an eternal identity in the spiritual world.
Okay, so it is the function of the soul, intelligence, kind of like function.
It's a function of the consciousness, but everything is ultimately coming from the soul. Yeah. Soul. It's not merged together. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So okay. Thank you.
From my understanding, I may be. I have a very minimal understanding, so I'm doing my best to explain.
Yeah. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay, anything else? If not, we'll go take prasadam. Jai Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpa Trupyasya Kripa Sindhu Vyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.